This is the Gopher Puck Live Podcast, part of the Pull Tab Sports family.
Oh boy. Jupe making mistakes. I love it.
And I'll never forget my first college game. It was up in Duluth at the deck, and we got to play the Gophers that first game. And puck went in the zone. I was a defenseman, started coming around the wall, and I went down to pinch to keep it in. And this guy named Trent Platt just absolutely rolled me right over, hammered right down, got up, helmet turned, snot bubbles out of the neck. One of those you can't find your way back to the bench. And I realized I'm in big boy college hockey now. I think we've got a really unique situation where we can adapt quickly and fast. Obviously, straight change quick with the transfer portal, NIL, CHL players being eligible.
Now, here's Jupiter and Vigo. Good evening and welcome to the Gopher Puck Live Podcast. We are live here on a Monday night. Let's bring Vigs in. Good evening, Vigs. We're going to have a special show tonight, don't we?
Special show, special time, special format. Thanks everybody for joining us. Exciting times for the Pride on Ice.
Yeah, he did mention format. We're streaming a little differently this time, starting a new system of broadcasting, but we're still live here. You can see us on YouTube and horizontal and vertical, and of course we're live on Twitter as well and Facebook. But let's not delay it any longer, Vigs. We've got a first-time current coach as a guest tonight.
Yeah, thanks for Brett hopping on tonight.
Well, let's bring him in.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Well, there he is. He's already talking. He's ready to go. Brett Larson, Gopher Hockey, new coach. Has the media attention calmed down a bit as we're talking to you right now live? Has it been a little crazy for you?
It has been a little crazy, but it's been fun too. I've actually really enjoyed it. So meeting a lot of people, getting out there, and obviously it's another level for sure, but it's been fun.
I bet it's been another level. It's not just you, but it's something that would affect your entire family. This is a major change for you and your family, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So I'm doing this from home right now on my phone. I'm going to commute a little bit here for a while. I've got a son that's a senior, and he's going to stay and finish his senior year here. And I'll be doing a little bit of commuting, and then obviously moving the family down once he gets through that. But obviously for the family, it's going to be a change, but I think it's also nice because he'll be able to finish his senior year here.
Vigs, I know you mentioned to me and Scott Slarshooter today kind of an interesting story about the last time this change kind of happened for Brett, didn't you?
Yeah, I think when your position changed from Duluth to St. Cloud, your son was just like, Dad, what the heck? How could you? I hate the Huskies. Is there like a similar feeling of like, how could you pick the Gophers? I asked you about Hoagie on your introduction day. I mean, it's got to be quite the shock for everybody.
Yeah, it is for obviously the people in Duluth and those areas. There, I'm getting a lot of congrats, but also getting a hard time with it from them. So my kids have been different this year. It's funny. My daughter's a huge fan of the Gopher gymnastics team. She loves it, and she can't wait to get down there and meet them. And my son is really excited too. He's actually really excited. Had him around the campus the other day, and that was my first recruiting tour, taking him around. He goes, Dad, I want to go here. So hopefully someday he'll be going to school there while I'm coaching. And it's actually been a little bit different than that. You know, he was only 8 years old at the time, or 9 years old at the time. Funny, I came home and I said, I was just offered the head job of the St. Cloud State Huskies. And he said, Dad, I hate the Huskies, and so, now he tells me other things. He follows social media a little bit more than I do. And before I got the job, he came in the bedroom one day and he said, Hey, Dad, you just lost a poll to anybody else. And I said, Huh? I said, I wonder where he coaches. I've never heard of that guy, but boy.
So did you do a little Easter egg hunt where everybody could find Gopher gear around the house and they could restock the wardrobe a little bit?
Out in plenty of Gopher gear, I can tell you that. He's wearing the sweatshirt right now down in the basement. He's got a white hoodie with a big M on the front, and it's fun to see.
Is there any particular swag so far that you've picked up? I'm sure there's a big closet of stuff you can pick from that you've been drawn to.
For sure. Obviously, our equipment manager, Lee, I've been bugging him already because there's so much good stuff. So got a bunch of nice quarter zips I wear to work every day. Got a few good T-shirts, golf shirts. I'll be ready for the summer. So it's pretty nice stash he's got down there.
All right, I was bugging Slarksy earlier, but any announcements yet with the staff? We're still waiting on HR on that.
Yeah, that is. So that's just taking a little bit of time. I can tell you we're really, really close. We're just waiting for me to be able to officially announce it, going by the HR rules and everything else. It's not that I don't want to. I'd love to, but apparently there's these rules I got to follow when it comes to HR stuff. So we're gonna have to stick with that.
These darn
Yeah.
rules, Vigs. The U is so strict, aren't they, Vigs?
It feels like Minnesota leads the nation in compliance, so it's a little adjustment, I think, for a lot of people. It's like they play by the book at the U.
They do. These background checks are serious, I guess. I was glad I passed mine. So I got through that. And I know the rest of the staff is hoping theirs go through as well.
I know you can't talk about like staff members specifically, but what do you look for in a staff that you build? What do you lean on them for? What do you hope that they contribute? What are you expecting there?
Well, you've got a few things that you start with. Number one, you want good people. You know that as a head coach, you have to surround yourself with people that you trust. And we're going to go through the pressure and that together. And you got to know you're in it together. So that's number one. Another one for me, obviously. Then you look at just where their expertise is. Kind of obviously looking for a guy that can come in and develop our defensemen, and a guy that can develop our forwards. A guy that might be a little bit of both, but is kind of taking the recruiting load on his shoulders a little bit more. So, now that you're also allowed to have these different titles like director of player development, director of goalie development, which are essentially part-time roles, but they're big-time people on the staff. So, those people add to it as well. So we'll be announcing, 5 people here shortly in those roles.
So I know a lot of people have an idea of how coaching staffs can work, but you can have the 4 coaches who can go off campus, recruit. They're like the full-time staff. Then, we've had Paul Martin as a player development guy here before. Other schools have had, goalie coaches. You can't have the volunteers anymore. But how does that work as you put together staffs?
Yeah, you can put your staff together like that. So obviously the 4 full-time head coaches that are NCAA compliant to recruit on the road. That's a big part of it, and coach at the same time. The director of player development, the director of goalie development, which we're going to have those 2 titles. Essentially, they can't go on the road and recruit, but they can call recruits. They can get on the phone, they can get on the horn and call those recruits. Talk to them about our program. They can help us with obviously our player development piece. They can be on the ice. They can't directly coach the player on the ice, but they can have a relationship with them. Essentially, they're the coach and direct the coaches. They're almost like paid consultants that can come in and help you run your program. So it's really valuable to have good people in those positions, which we're going to have great people in those positions because they can help with the entirety of the program. Like I said, they can coach the coaches, they can have relationships with the players, they can get on the phone and help with the recruits. There's a lot they can do. The 3 full-time coaches, you want those guys to be, like I said, experts in certain areas: D, forward, penalty kill, power play, developing players as coaches, and being able to hit the road and recruit.
Very interesting because I look at the roster right now and the current players committed to come in. Even if Bob had stayed, it looked like there's going to be a lot of interesting decisions that were going to have to be made because you've got roster limits and technically the rule hasn't changed yet. So it seems like there's a lot of tough decisions for you and the staff coming up soon of which players to keep, which players to bring in. It's not all easy, is it?
No, those are tough. Obviously they're all good kids, but my main job is to make sure that we put the right lineup on the ice next year. That's our number one goal right now. We're talking behind the scenes as much as we can as a group and making sure we're on the same page, making sure that we feel really good about the team we put on the ice. So it's never easy, and they aren't easy decisions, but nothing great comes easy. You have to make some tough decisions and do what you think's best for the program. So we'll certainly have some tough decisions for us, but you know what? I'd rather have tough decisions than no decisions. If that means we've got good players, and we have to make good, tough decisions on good players. So I'd rather have those tough decisions to make because that means we're going to put a really good product on the ice.
Vigs, one thing that Brett mentioned in his opening press conference is that he doesn't think he's that far away, and you kind of pointed that out last week when you mentioned, hey, do you know what team beat all of the Frozen Four participants? It was Minnesota.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. You look at the season Minnesota just went through, playing one of the toughest strength of schedules. A lot of turnover at forward, a lot of turnover at D, brought in a transfer goalie, but a lot of pieces look like they've been in place for next year. In your meetings with your players, which I think you said was going to wrap up probably early this week, what are some of the themes that came up in those discussions with guys?
Well, I think a lot of these things are basically around that. Like, we don't feel we're that far off. It did, even though the record wasn't where anybody wanted it. It was a really tough year from that standpoint. The guys don't want to go through that again, obviously, and the fans don't want to go through it. And I certainly don't want to go through it. So the areas that we need to get better, obviously, were consistency. Consistency was a big part of it. And I think the good thing is, with the tough decisions we're going to have to make, one thing that drives consistency for me is competitiveness within a lineup, knowing that you got to earn that spot every week. Nothing's guaranteed, and I think with the moves we can make, which there are going to be a few, with the moves we can make, whether in the portal and the decisions we have to make around the current lineup, there's going to be major competition within this group this year, and I think that's a really good thing to drive us to that next level.
I think I've heard you talk about coaching in the past, how you want to let players have the freedom to be the players that they are, to be creative, to take those chances, and to foster kind of that development of players. You don't want a player who has to figure out they have to make 100 out of 100 right decisions. If they make a couple of mistakes, you don't want them to dwell on that. How do you balance that, decision-making and coaching piece of it?
Well, I think the biggest thing that you try to develop is you try to develop the habits within the game. So the little things that eventually they're not even thinking about, and that frees them up to play in those creative areas, right? So our habits, like our defensive detail, our stick position, our angling, the fundamentals of the game are something that you can't lay off. You need to keep pushing these guys on it. And the more we can develop the habits the right way, the more we can develop our competitive spirit within the lineup. Now you got habits, you got compete level, and now you put a really talented, I think, what's going to be a really talented roster into that great environment with great habits. Now that's when they're going to be free to play, and you put themselves in the position. Like, I've said it a lot of times, or talked about it a lot. I want players that have the confidence and ability to make plays. What I like to look for is what happens after that play doesn't work. And that's where the character piece, the work piece, and the habit piece comes in. So I always think of a turnover. Do you make a big loop and throw your head back and kind of blame somebody else, or do you hit your edges as hard as you can and bust your butt back and break that play up? Because it's how you respond after that play that really matters to me.
An interesting comment here from Max Veach. I think you might know who he is, Brett. When I said I wanted you back in maroon and gold, this isn't what I meant. He's happy for you anyways. Max is a good guy. I'm a really big fan of Max.
Yep. Yeah, great guy. And obviously, hey, in all honesty, it's the right colors, and it's a dream opportunity. It's a dream job for any coach in college hockey. They'll tell you that. It's a dream job that I couldn't be more proud to be a part of.
And I've always thought of this: who's the greatest Wisconsin coach? Badger Bob, he was a Gopher. Or you think Dean Blaze was a Gopher? And Don Lucia, he was from Alaska, and he came down here. I don't think it matters. It matters what you do in the role.
No, you look at it; it's pretty common. Scott Sandelin's a North Dakota guy at Duluth. He's a Bulldog now, but he came from North Dakota, so it happens quite frequently. And as a coach, what you want to do when you get in is you want to make sure the alumni and the program sees right away that you're all in, that you understand that there's a lot of people that built this program, and that your main job is to keep them, I think, proud of their program, and that knowing that everything you do, you're trying to earn that trust every day. And before you know it, hopefully they consider me a Gopher, and hopefully they consider me a part of their family. But I know I got to earn that.
How close was that Merritt Park jersey to a Gopher jersy? I mean, when you were little, did you kind of envision it, or?
It's the same. So I have that picture on my phone. Actually, well, I'll be honest, I did. I sent it to Mark Coyle during the interview process. I said, hey, I think I was meant to be a Gopher. I was wearing the jersey when I was a squirt. So it's really close.
Are those kids on the west side? They're kind of like the gritty kids, and maybe differing from the east side cake eaters in Duluth.
Oh,
the town, obviously. That's how we look at it. We're the hardworking, gritty guys, and we're proud of that. So yeah, West Duluth is where I grew up, not far from Denfeld High School, right across the street. obviously grew up idolizing a guy like Rob Stauber. Rob was just ahead of me, and led the Hunters to their first state tournament, I think. And that was a big part of it. A couple of years later, I got to go twice, but grew up definitely in the West Duluth, and I idolizing a guy for like Rob.
I was a big Rob Stauber fan, but not before he arrived, because he knocked my Jaguars. I'm a Bloomington Jefferson kid, out of the state tournament in the 80s. I remember watching that in junior high. I'm like, who is this guy? And it hurt, but then he came to be a Gopher, and then of course we love him. So
yeah. Well, a couple of the Gophers growing up for me were Rob Stauber and Corey Millen. Those were the guys that I grew up just kind of idolizing and watching. And those were two guys that were obviously big time Gophers and really fun to follow.
For me, it was a Mike Crowley. That kid was just,
Mike's awesome.
He's my favorite all-time Gopher. Probably always will be. He was just magic back there. And as a defenseman, I mean, he has 63 points in a season. Who does that?
I actually just ran into him recently, which was fun. And our paths kind of crossed a little bit. He was up and down out in California, Long Beach Ice Dogs. We both played some games for them. And he was on the other end. He was the NHL down to the IHL. I was the lower end up to the IHL, so we didn't cross too much. But he's a guy that I always used to love watching play as well.
One thing I wanted to talk about is, to both of you, we lost a program recently. Mercer here's just shut it down. That's not great on growing hockey leagues, but Maryville is coming in a couple of years, but that was kind of a shock to the NCAA hockey family.
Yeah, obviously Rick Otkin had done a great job there forever, and really sad he retires and that happens. I don't know the behind the scenes in it, but as college hockey coaches, we're pretty unanimous on one area, and that's we want to see this game grow, and we're trying to do everything we can to create more opportunities for kids to play college hockey at the Division I level. So there's been some good momentum. We want to keep that going. We hope this doesn't spin it the other way, but certainly really sad to see that happen right now.
And the
positive, what do you kind of think of are like the big keys to growing the game in college hockey? David Carl is obviously one of the most vocal college coaches on things that need to change or be different or be fostered along to change. What do you kind of think are things that might be looked at here?
Well, I think obviously that the player pool has expanded so much, right? So now there's more opportunity for colleges to build teams and build highly competitive teams. So that's the one thing I'm hoping really can spur some of these schools on to start a program. I don't want to say easy by any means, but it is easier than it used to be to field a competitive lineup pretty much right away. With the transfer portal now being another part of that, and the ability to pick up players in the portal, the ability to go up in Canada to get high-end players, the ability to go to Europe and get players that you couldn't get in the past. I'm really hoping that this expanded player pool is a really good push for some teams to start a program.
And Viggs, of course, we've already got that question. What's your stance on the home side NCAA regionals? That's everyone's favorite topic these days, Brett.
That's easy for me. I'm all in on that. I would rather play at home. You gave me a thumbs up. That's good. I appreciate it. I didn't know how you guys went on it, but it's a cliche term and everyone talks about student athlete experience, but let's make that the best experience possible. Let's play in front of a big crowd. Let's let the top 8 teams earn home ice in that first game, which I think they have throughout the season, and you should get rewarded for that. I'm all in on that. I know Dave Carl's pushing that as well. We've talked about it. I don't think there's too many college coaches that are against that.
We can tell you're not a frequent listener of our podcast. That's probably a good thing as a coach. But we talk with Brad Schlossman, and we talk about campus regionals and having that first round game. Or the dream would be a best of 3. We know that's a little bit of a far fetched plan, but we've had Adam Wood on our show as well and talked about it. And we just think it's the biggest games of the year. You want the biggest atmosphere. You've seen in the conference tournaments, those championship games are just terrific atmosphere, sell out. It rewards the fans. It makes it easier to go, and just it's a great time of year.
Yeah, I can tell you, I've been through it on the negative end. My first year at St. Cloud, we had a great team and we had the first seed and played AIC up in Fargo, and the ice was terrible. And it was not a great environment, and obviously they earned the win. I'm not taking that away from them, but sure would have been nice to play them in St. Cloud, on the home rink in that game. But I do think that protects your top seeds a little bit for the most part. They've earned it. They should play at home. And I think it's going to be a better atmosphere and environment all around.
It's gonna be very interesting. Oh, Eric Brever, he's one of our favorites here. What is your relationship with the other Big Ten coaches? I'm guessing you probably know a lot of these people already.
For sure. I'll start with Steve Rollick. Steve and I coached together at Duluth back in the day. We're really good friends. I worked for him for 2 years. I don't know if the fans know that. I was the associate head coach at Ohio State, so I have been in the Big Ten. I was able to coach the Buckeyes' first game ever in Michigan that year, and we made it to the Big Ten championship game at the X. So Steve and I are really close. I really look up to him. My first coaching job was with him. We were at the college level. We were together. I've known Guy Godowski since all the way back in the West Coast Hockey League days when he was up in Fresno and I was in San Diego. And Mike Hastings and I, obviously, he's a St. Cloud alum. We've been close for a long time. We coached on the U.S. Olympic team together in 2021, I think, in Beijing. So when you do the Olympics, especially in Beijing during COVID, you get to know each other really well. We were stuck in a little apartment for 3 weeks together, and I spend time brushing our teeth next to each other. So got to know him pretty well. I'm thinking around the league now, obviously to the other teams. Those are just a few off the top of my head that I know really well.
Viggs, do you have any final questions for Brett before we let him go here? We don't want to keep him. He's got to get some food in. Probably watch that basketball game coming up here real soon, is he?
Oh, Brett's got to be on the road recruiting right now, I think, right?
That too, but
yeah.
You mentioned, I think,
I just trip, hit the road pretty good. Got out and saw some of our incoming guys. I got to tell you, that was fun. Yeah, just sort of the fans to know I was able to see some of our incoming guys that they'll see this year, and I was really impressed and can't wait to have them.
Yeah, you mentioned on KFan that, the CHL is such an opportunity for big programs to go out and grab future first round picks and, try to evaluate them. What is the landscape right now when you go after those big first rounders? And I'm sure everyone's out there looking for them right now as they're trying to finalize their roster for next year.
Yeah, there's obviously a lot of competition for those guys. It's also an interesting environment because we're used to going up to the BCHL or the AJ or those leagues and communicating with the coaches and the staff and having a good feel that way. Now you feel a little bit of an outsider up there, because obviously they don't want to lose their players, and we all understand that, right? So it's a little bit different feel. Obviously, you're working with the advisors and the agents, and you're getting up to see these kids play. But there's a lot of competition for these top end kids, but we plan to be involved in that. We plan to be involved in a player here or there that we think could really help our team. Obviously, I'm not going to waver from the fact that our homegrown talent's critically important, and we're going to stay with that for the majority. But if we have the opportunity to mix in a player here or there that can really help our program, we're going to do it.
When you talk to the guys who are already committed or the guys who potentially commit, what are their big questions for you as the new coach?
Well, the good thing is the hockey world is so small. I know most of them already, and I've dealt with most of them already. Even the current team. I think you might have saw my first speech in there. I joked that every single one of them turned me down once. So I pretty much recruited this whole team. We got a lot of no's, and they ended up at Minnesota. So now I'm happy to do that. But I think just the fact that the hockey world is so small, and I know most of these kids and have relationships with them already. I think that brings a comfort level for them knowing the coach that's coming in and already having a relationship.
Well, we can't thank you enough for the time. Can you still hear us there, Brett?
Yeah, it changed on me a little bit there. I don't know if you can hear or see me, but
we can still hear you. This is probably a good sign to tell us to let you go so you can go have your dinner and whatnot. It is quite all right. We cannot thank you enough for coming up on our live show tonight, and we will see you down the road.
Thanks, guys. I enjoyed it. So thanks for having me on.
See you later. That was fun, Viggs, don't you think?
Yeah, nice to get to know the new coach a little bit better. I think a lot of people were looking for anybody else in those early season polls, but I think the more that people get to know Brett and the more they listen to him, the more they hear their vision that he's going to be giving to Gopher hockey, the more that they're going to be impressed. Everyone I talk to from Duluth and St. Cloud, USA Hockey, super impressed with the work he's done. They're so happy for him to land this job, and they're interested to see what he can do with it.
It's definitely going to be fun. Well, before we go on any further, Vigs, we need to talk about Cub Foods. Big weekend this weekend. We had the Final Four. We got the championship game tonight, and we've got the Frozen Four coming up this week. Time to pick up all the stuff you need from Cub.
Yeah, if you're getting ready for the Frozen Four this weekend, I highly recommend you get down to Cub. I've been down to my Quarry Cub quite a bit lately as I get together for all these festivities like Easter and get ready for these championships. But if you're going to Cub, they're going to have everything that you need in stock. They're going to have great produce. They're going to have great sales, great prices. If you're looking for some THC stuff, they got you covered. If you need a couple of beverages to go with, a lot of Cubs have liquor stores now attached. And if you want to shop online, if you want it delivered, if you want to pick it up, Cub can take it for you. And they're one of us. They support Dickeytown athletes. They support PJ Flex headset, and you can always rely on them. So shop Cub, shop happy.
And of course, we can't forget about Cascade CBX Sport. They still have their $5 sample available.
Yeah, that's right. Check out Cascade CBX Sport. It's a miracle drug. It reduces inflammation, reduces stress. It makes you feel good. As I'm transitioning from hockey coaching to golf season, the Cascade CBX Sport's been great for those aches and pains. And you should check it out too. CascadeCBXsport.com/team. And for just $5, you can get a 300 milligram sample jar. Shipping's free with that. And you can try it out for yourself. They're a hungry startup and they're looking for more believers like us. So check it out. Trust the shield. Stay on the field.
And of course, we thank Cub and Cascade CBX Sport for sponsoring the Gopher Puck Live podcast. Well, I'm seeing a lot of comments. I couldn't put them up all during the show, but we got Jason Bryant here saying, Brett, fantastic dude. Sad to lose him. Yes, definitely a good gain for us. Of course, we got Steve here. He's thanking everything. Here we go. Vonner, he was one of those on the fence on the coach, but I give him a lot of credit for doing this. Good on him. Well, we definitely appreciate it too. It's our first coach to be on live here, Vigs. Or have we had a coach on before at all? Except for you. You're our coach.
Yeah, I'm on a different level of coaching, so it's good to get Brett on. He has been doing the media tour.
Oh, yeah.
I feel like he's been doing something just about every night, whether it's Fox 9, whether it's K-Fan. He's doing a couple other pods. I'm sure he'll continue to make the rounds here. I think the media coverage of Gopher hockey is something that's just a little bit different, and I do kind of wonder how much he knew it was going to be a part of the job. We've often talked about how if you're at Minnesota, you're more than just a hockey coach. You're kind of a CAO. You need to engage with the alumni. You need to engage with donors. You need to engage with the public through media. And it's just a huge part of the job. And Brett's really embracing that, I think.
And he's going to see a lot of you and I. Because, a lot of times early in the season, in the fall, there's not a lot of coverage. Either you or I are usually there. Chris is as well. He's going to get used to seeing our ugly mugs.
Yeah, I have not heard whether or not there'll be open practices yet. One of these days, I'm going to ask that question to Brett. Hopefully he lets me a little bit under the hood to see what's going on. I do think he is a player's coach. You hear the way he talks about how he wants to develop talent, how he wants to give players a little bit of freedom as long as they behave the right way. I think that's such a key in the modern game. It's a game of mistakes. It's why we love it so much. But you need to have players who are willing to put chips on the table. You can't have players who just fold all the time. And I think, as we watch this year's team, there's a lot of tentative hockey because I think there was that fear of making mistakes and playing it safe. And that's just not a way to win hockey games.
And we've already seen Nathan Airy last Monday, while you and I were just doing a little testing out of this platform, you're like, oh, Nathan Airy's in the portal. So that's kind of the first thing to drop, isn't it? Nathan Airy is looking somewhere else.
And I think for a goalie, being in the portal early is important, because most teams, they're only going to start one or two guys. So if you're looking for opportunities to play, you probably want to get that process underway as fast as you can. As we talked to Brett, he said there are decisions that they're going to have to make. And I'm sure they've had a lot of conversations with players already about what the roster could look like next year. Monday will be a busy day in the portal for people who follow Gopher hockey.
So we're keeping track. So Aerie is not going to be around, but it's been pretty quiet. We have not heard anyone else jumping in because the rules said, the day that Aerie jumped in last Monday was their first opportunity, which officially the rules are once a coach is announced, a new coach is announced, you have a 5-day kind of waiting period and then a 15-day extra portal to keep it simple. So that essentially gives, Minnesota players almost a 30-day type of portal they've got going here.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm not sure why more players who could be looking for new homes aren't in the portal yet. I'm sure they have advisors that are working the scenes to try to find them homes without them putting their names in. But it's something that will be happening, I think, as we project what a roster could look like for next year. They probably have more players than they have roster spots.
Yes. Do we think so they've got their meetings in Florida after the season, a couple weeks after, and they'll meet, and that's where you're going to go set up a desk and.
Well, we've got Brett on board now with our home site first round game.
That was great, by the way. Is there any chance that rule changes, or do they have to go higher up, or can they just make recommendations, or what's the process on that?
So they would just be making recommendations at their coaches meeting. Official rules have to go before the NCAA committees. Typically it's been a little more challenging to get those done quickly. The one nice thing with Brett being at Minnesota and having a good relationship with Mark Coyle already is they need that support from the AD. And that's ultimately where those decisions get made. I think when John Buccigross was on a pod the other week and he talked about the NCAA hockey, like going on their own, I think that's just some coaches being frustrated with the process of having non-hockey people making hockey decisions. And maybe that's spilling over into that. I don't think that's a real possibility for college hockey. I think that's just talking out of school there, but you never know. Maybe John Buccigross had too much top shelf Buffalo Trace that night, but there is a need for some rule changes. Yeah, there is a need for some rule changes in college hockey, and we'll see. With all this turnover in coaches, it could happen faster.
I hope to see that. Another thing that we saw even Mike Hastings talking about is, hey, let's get some more games in there. 2 to 4 more games for them to play. Well, speaking of Mike Hastings, let's, Wisconsin's in the Frozen Four. I don't think anybody had them getting to the Frozen Four because it's, I'll wait for this load here. When I scroll down to the bottom, here's, Wisconsin and Michigan State met in the final, and Wisconsin took care of them, Viggs. It was kind of quite the surprise.
Well, they really took advantage, that's for sure. I think Michigan State got into that feeling where let's stop making any plays that are risky. And when you do that in college hockey, you allow the other team to start stealing your blinds. And that's kind of what happened in that game. And Wisconsin just started taking some chances and they got some bounces. And when you play like Michigan State did in that game, you give the other team an opportunity. I think Gopher fans know that all too well from some of the history of Minnesota hockey, but this time Wisconsin came out on top. Not a great, pretty goal, but when you have a tight game like that, that's what you open yourself up to. And tough end to Michigan State. That busted my bracket. I thought they had too much talent. Losing Charlie Stramel in that game, I think, was a big impact. Mm-hmm. We've often talked about how one of the reasons Michigan State was so successful is they had a senior center like Stramel. When you lose him, everybody else bumps into a different role. And when you don't have that upper class support in your lineup, the younger players get put into situations they haven't get into before. And it costs Sparty.
But before that, Wisconsin took out Dartmouth. It was a close game until the end, and Wisconsin got away. But you had been saying for all year you couldn't trust Dartmouth, and sure enough, it came true, Viggs. 5-1 loss.
Bingo.
There wasn't much offense in the game. That was a late scoring game, I do believe.
Yeah. But I had, Wisconsin as the upset in that game as kind of my go-to there. So,
and then on the other side, of the lower part of the bracket, you did have Quinnipiac taking out Providence. That was a little more of a surprise. Providence had an excellent season, and a lot of us thought that they might be able to challenge North Dakota in the Sioux Falls region, but it turns out nobody could challenge North Dakota in that region.
North Dakota looked very strong. Full credit to Dane Jackson and that program for turning things around. I think that's a sign how quickly you can turn over a roster and make big changes. Brad Schlossman documented this, reconstruction many times for the Grand Forks Herald. Read up on that. I think Minnesota is going to have to go something similar. I don't think it's going to be as big a turnover as North Dakota went through, but it just shows you that in this era, you can rebuild a roster very quickly.
The top part of the bracket, just the first games, Michigan 5-1, Duluth took care of Penn State late. Any thoughts on that Penn State Duluth game? Boy, ESPN lost their whole talking point the entire weekend once who was no longer in the tournament.
Yeah, Scott Sandelin did a great job with Duluth this year. I think a lot of people were frustrated with the season they had last year, but he loaded up a top line, had a great goalie. They played very well against Penn State. I do think Penn State, one of those teams hadn't really achieved enough before, and it's probably impacted them a little bit in that game. Interesting to see Duluth advance, and they ran into Michigan, and Michigan looks really good. I think we need to see them in some tighter games here in the Frozen Four. I'm sure they'll get one with Denver, but they looked very good in their regional.
Denver also looked great in the regional. Took a 5-0 victory over Cornell, and they faced Western.
Cornell lost in the first round. Interesting. Another ECAC team.
Well, I'll still remind you that Minnesota has lost to an ECAC team way too many times in the national title game. Well, we don't want to talk about that, though.
We don't want to talk about that. It doesn't fit my narrative tonight.
So, yeah, we go down here. Obviously, we had the Michigan holding on at the end against Duluth. Figs. That was a fun game because Duluth, you just knew they were going to come back. They were dominating at the end of the game. They were putting a lot of pressure on Michigan. And unlike previous years, this year, Michigan held on and showed they can handle it.
Well, I think Michigan kept playing, and they came through continuing to play and put out offense. And, they have some very good high-end skill players at Michigan, and they've got depth. I think that's the one thing that's different about this Michigan team with some of the others. If they've got some senior leadership back there that fills depth roles, and they've got balanced scoring throughout their lineup. The one thing about Duluth, they were very top heavy this year. They relied on their top line quite a bit.
Denver pretty much dominated Western that entire game, Viggs. It was never really ever in doubt.
Yeah, Eric Polkamp, I think, is my favorite for the Hobie this year. He looked very good in the regionals. He was a player that came out of the portal and picked Denver and, made the transition seamlessly. Very good player for them. I always think in the NCAA tournament, you need elite defensemen to win. And Denver definitely has one right there. And Denver will be interesting to watch going forward. They landed Ryan Lynn from the CHL, a high first-round pick for the NHL here coming up. Very attractive place. I think the next CHL player everyone's got their eyes on is DuPont. We were kind of alluding to a player like that with Brett earlier in the show. Every school in the nation wants that player. So it'll be quite the resume builder to whichever coach lands him.
And of course, there's the North Dakota finishing off the shutout of the entire regional, not allowing a single goal, Viggs.
Yeah, I was intrigued with Penn State and Quinnipiac going after each other on the social media about their Hobie candidates, which was more fun than the North Dakota Quinnipiac game because we saw all the ESPN coverage of Wittenbach here this past weekend.
And then there's that Michigan State Wisconsin final. I felt bad for Augustine because he was kind of let hung out to dry a little bit. I'm not sure if he could have rescued that game at all. Because they all of a sudden, it's like Wisconsin got that one goal, and it was all of a sudden it was on.
Yeah, I think Michigan State just needed one more defender to push them over the top this year. I just don't think they quite had that, like some of the other top teams in college hockey seem to have.
So there we go. The Frozen Four, top winningest programs in NCAA, all meeting in the Frozen Four. Michigan, Denver, North Dakota playing Wisconsin for the first time in the NCAA tournament since 1982. For us Gopher fans, could it be a worse Frozen Four team-wise?
I mean, it just puts the number of titles for a school further ahead of Minnesota, which I think is probably tough for most Minnesota fans to stomach. I mean, it's really hard. I mean, if you're a Gopher fan, you probably don't want to see Michigan, North Dakota, or Wisconsin win this one. You're maybe okay with Denver because it seems like they handle success better than everybody else, but it's a tough Frozen Four for us, I think.
But then you get the fact, okay, what if Denver with North Dakota wins? It's another NCHC sweep. Or let's say Wisconsin beats North Dakota and it's Michigan, Wisconsin. Yay, we get a Big Ten team winning this year. Crap,
I think the only thing I can be happy about that is Mike Hastings, pretty good dude. Tom Molesky, pretty good. Those two people are joys to work with over the years. So I could be happy for them. But, David Carlin, being the NCAA spokesman for a lot of the changes we want to see, probably wins out for me.
Hard to argue that. But I was with some people and they were visibly upset that North Dakota was there, and they're going to be in Vegas, and it is North Dakota hosted tournament or a Frozen Four in Vegas. So, oh boy, it's gonna be interesting. It's gonna be interesting. It's always fun. Frozen Four is a great time. Unfortunately, there we go. Vonner. The classic lose scenario. What else is on? Well, I'm going to watch it. You're going to watch it, aren't you?
Yeah, for sure going to watch it. It's going to be great hockey. These are good teams. There's a lot of pro prospects to watch in this. I think it's interesting that North Dakota's in it with some of those kind of underage players that are going to be playing for them, and see whether or not that can pay off in the NCAA tournament. And maybe bring a title. We often talk about how first-round picks have a hard time winning NCAA titles. There's a lot of first-round picks playing this weekend in Vegas.
So, what are your picks for each game, and who is the champion? I'm guessing it might be Denver related.
I mean, I like Denver quite a bit. The way that they play, the way that they recover from mistakes, the goaltending they're getting. Denver's probably my favorite for the weekend coming out of this tournament.
Mm-hmm.
It would be fun to see Wisconsin make it to the championship.
Yes.
I just don't think we're going to see that.
I want to stick with my picks, and I had picked Michigan and Michigan State in the final. So I'm going to pick Michigan's over Denver in the final. Michigan over North Dakota.
So we're going opposites.
Yeah, Michigan.
I'm going Denver over Wisconsin.
Michigan over North Dakota. God, I hate just saying that. Well, we can do that. Look at that Mote coming in. Can you guys talk about how you got Brett to come to GPL? Was it Kinger pulling some strings for Bullet? Actually, no. During his press conference, you went over and spoke with him, and at the same time, about 5 feet away, I was speaking with Scott Slarks, the SID, He's like, hey, let's get him on the podcast. And Slarky's like, oh, I don't know if I want to subject you two jokers to him. But at the same time, you were talking to Larson, weren't you?
Yeah, I think we had the same idea at the same time. And then Brett is embracing the role and knows that there's a little bit of PR that probably has to happen with his hire. When that poll comes out, I think there's a little bit of pride in the coach that goes, hey, I want to prove to everybody that I'm the right pick. And so I'm going to go out and meet with everybody face to face and see how it goes. So I think Brett was more than willing to come on and plead his case to the fans and try to generate a little bit of excitement for next year.
It was just more of it was kind of a timing thing too. We were trying to get it to happen last week, but he was, the man is busy, Viggs. The man is very
And I think
busy.
coaches are just warming up to us. Bob did mention during the year that he was looking forward to joining us at some point to be on the pod. So maybe at some point we'll get a little margaritas with Bob and talk about college coaching and see how it goes. But,
Let's see if we can get Bob to come on this summer. We'll have a summer. We can have a couple summer episodes. It doesn't have to be live. Maybe we even do it recorded.
We'll see.
We're
getting more Rube cred out there, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's good because, like I said, he's going to see a lot of us. That's just how it is. And that's the most I've ever spoken to a coach. I hardly ever spoke to Don or Bob. I mean, Bob would know who I am. I'm just the white-haired guy standing in front of him asking all these weird questions at times because I didn't see half the game because I'm looking through a camera. But I just hoping Brett has a little more understanding about that. I don't know. What do you do?
Well, we look forward to the weekend ahead, and
Yes.
next week will be a busy one for Brett. I think we'll see moves right away out of the portal. We'll get more clarity on the recruits that are actually going to make it to campus. I thought about asking him, who are the guys that have signed their national letters of intent, and what does that mean now? But we'll give him some space to figure out how everything's going to work out with the portal, with his roster, and who's coming back. So
yeah, we talked about keeping him on for 20 minutes. We went over that amount. I could have kept asking a lot more questions, more just about him, maybe less hockey, but we didn't want to keep him too long. We'll just glide into this. Maybe we can get him on for a segment, sometime during the season too.
we'll see.
We're gonna try.
Okay.
All right, now let's just get to overtime, man. Get your drink ready. Let's go.
I'm a little thirsty. Yeah, let's go.
Yeah, let's go. We are headed to overtime. You know what that means. It's Vigo's Beverage of the Week. That was a nice little pop there.
Yeah, we got a new coach. We got a little cork popping happening, so why not? This is a beauty from the cellar. This is via Russian River. It's called Consecration. So it's a strong ale aged in barrels with black currants. It's one of my favorites. Cheers. Special beer, special coach.
Very nice. Very
Tart,
nice.
rich, dark, lots of fruit. Really good.
What's going on at Penn State? Lots of early departures. Probably.
I'm a little surprised to see JJ enter the portal for them. Just a player who didn't like their role, maybe didn't like the coaching. Who knows? It's interesting though. We'll see, because obviously I think a lot of people are expecting McKenna to turn pro. Mm-hmm. He would probably benefit with another year. For Jackson Smith is coming back for Penn State. Also interesting. So curious.
Tom's Watch Bar. I'm just reading through some of the messages here. You can see some of the messages on your side, can't you?
Yeah, I don't think I have the controls that you do, but I can still see messages.
I'm sorry.
And we did the Tom's Watch Bar Dinky Town Athletes podcast once here in Minneapolis, but I know they have one in Vegas, which will be fun.
Do they?
Be wary though. I think it's a North Dakota and Michigan watch party at Tom's. Could be some fun people watching.
I don't know. We know so many people going to Vegas. It's not like I can't wish for a comet to hit the arena like we usually would with so many teams that we hate.
That would be bad for the Frozen Four.
It would be. Didn't get a chance to ask Brett, but I'm guessing he probably goes. You think, or is he too busy? Or coaches tend to go just to see each other at times. It's a good time to meet, but I guess they do have their meetings after that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's a little bit of a networking thing and a way to wind down. But you never know. Brett could be recruiting at the CHL playoffs. Who knows?
Who is? Oh, so you kind of said Polkamp is your favorite. You think for the Hobie? I like Polkamp as well. What do you think? Does he get?
Yeah, I think it comes down to Polkamp and Plant. I think those two are the ones that I'd put my money on. I just think Polkamp, has had one of those years where, top scoring defenseman, one of the top scorers for his team, gets the edge for me this year. Really dynamic player, plays a big game, could project well to be a pro.
And it looks like he's not going to the Frozen Four, but nothing.
He's got to be busy. He's got to work.
It could be crazy next week. The portal just is closing today for the women. It's been a little quiet for the women, actually. We had a couple of commitments that Tim Bruley sent over to me. One of them to the Minnesota.
Goldsworthy.
Yes. But the women's wasn't as active. It just seemed a little quieter. We didn't get a lot of messages and things like that saying, "Hey, get me in the portal, blah blah blah." Or, I play this position. This was my numbers. It's been a little quieter on that side, but which probably just means it's going to be crazy for the men.
Well, I think the thing with the women's portal is, there's no longer the COVID year. That's worked its way out of the game. Mm-hmm. And there's less of a junior hockey opportunity in the women's game either. So you don't have all these delayed commitments and things that force that churn. In the men's game, things are getting crazy with roster limits, programs being cut, CHL. It's just there's faster churn in the men's game right now, which is why I think on Monday the men's portal is going to be ridiculous again. And unfortunately, I think you're going to have a lot of players who are going to have a hard time finding a next spot when they are being encouraged to go elsewhere.
It is getting tricky. It is getting very tricky. Who knows? I've got the let's see if I can point the right, whatever the right way to point here. So we got the chat going in the window here, and even on vertical. I'm kind of curious how many people are watching on the vertical stream. This is a new feature we're doing with our host here. We'll have to see how it works. I know Viggs is adapting quite a bit because there is a delay between us two. You guys see it pretty well, but there's a delay, so. Well, it's kind of a practice run with the head coach, but so far so good.
I like how you just went without a net. You're just like, well, we're gonna have a coach on for the first time. Let's change up all of our software and just go without a net and do it live.
Go home. Well,
yeah.
The funny thing, so it's recording the full recording. It's recording the vertical recording. It's recording every individual player all on my machine at once. So that's pretty good.
I trust you with the technical stuff.
Yeah.
I'm just here to provide some insights where I can and drink beer.
And Vonner says, what does he says? Let me close this off here. I have too many windows open. Your audio is quieter than Vig, just FYI. Yeah, probably. We're adjusting.
I'm a loud person. I've had many players over my career coaching tell me that I'm very loud. So it's important to be.
Well, I can change things a little bit. I can bring this up a little bit. I mean, it's hard to adjust on the fly. The stress of beer drinking.
This isn't my usual loaf of bread, though. This is
it's spring. It's the spring's coming. A little lighter, maybe.
well, okay, it is 10%, but it's smaller. 10%, but it is 12.6 ounces.
Oh,
So I
Steve, I
lied.
see 49 currently on horizontal, 18 on vertical. So some people are using the vertical. Oh, wrong. Well, let's see, Brever just popped up. It moved on me. So yeah, there we go. Let's see what pops up. There we go. Currently, I mean, that's, yeah. Like I said, we're trying something different, get different options, and it's going to be kind of nice for editing. I'll tell you that when I've got it all already lined up for us. So knock on wood. Oh boy. Who's texting me? Roosevelt. New era when you can get a coach on your podcast. Thanks, Jimmy.
It's certainly a new era.
Thanks, Jimmy.
Yeah, we'll be interested to see if the coach brings any players with him as well from St. Cloud. You know, there's a couple forwards like Bernovic, Rode, Hall.
Yeah,
So we'll see.
it's going to be
And
interesting.
then he recruited 4 CHL players for St. Cloud next year too. So, you know, he's definitely got some experience up there.
Yes, he does. Sorry, I'm just going through making some adjustments here. Nothing for you to worry about, luckily.
Biggest opportunity will be at defense, obviously.
Oh, boy.
I think most fans who watched the Gophers last year were wishing a little bit more there. I don't see any saviors coming from St. Cloud on the defensive end. So Henricks is definitely a talented player, but they're probably going to need some more. That's why DuPont would be such a elite fit, potential number 1 pick in the draft in 2027.
Well, here's Brever. My unverified source indicate that there are a number that will be coming east. On
4 could be what I've heard potentially.
That's
So
a
we'll see.
lot.
That's a lot.
That's a lot because that means you're definitely getting rid of players.
Yes. And I've heard 6 or 7 players could be leaving. And some potential incoming players may not be coming. So it'll be very interesting to see how this shakes out.
I wonder about Nevers coming in because he's out of junior availability. He's like I said, he's maxed out on age there. I haven't seen great numbers from him. The coach that had the relationship with, the family is maybe not around anymore. I wonder about him.
Yep. And I do wonder if we see any like gray shirts in hockey. It's something that's been a football thing in the past where a player is committed to a school, but they don't have a roster spot for them. So a player can like gray shirt and not be on scholarship and basically push out their enrollment a year and come in the following year and their eligibility doesn't start. It's something I've never really seen in hockey, but I would be interested to see if there are potentially some players who might look for that option. It would be interesting to see how it would work because you can't play another year of juniors.
Yeah. I don't know.
But I know that there were players that committed to Augustana before they had a program and basically sat a year where they basically just practiced for Reboyne and didn't play for a year. Yeah. But they wanted to be a part of that program. So they basically took a year off.
Okay.
You know, until that roster limit thing gets solved, we'll see.
Just watching some of the Artemis stuff up on the TV. You like my remodel behind me, Viggs?
Yeah, you put a lot of work in back there, huh?
Yeah, it was the other night. I was getting all set up, and let me see if I can. There's more zoomed in. Let me see if I can zoom out. I don't want to see my head.
Yeah, it's looking good back there.
Of course, there's the old bumper from Mariucci from between the benches right here. We got our 3D Goldie thing here. A couple my old license plates, and You'll like this one, Viggs. And there's Faber. Got the old Rubes jersey up there as well.
Jersey there too, yeah.
Yeah. Got the Rubes jersey as well. So
yeah, a lot of good things there except for the red color.
Yeah, but it's the Rubes jersey. It's part of our past.
Yep.
Part
of the past.
I also got a Wisconsin puck here and a North Dakota puck. North Dakota, I bought that first weekend. We did our podcast from the suite. The other one was the last time I was in Wisconsin. They had a stripe out day that didn't go so well. It didn't work so well for them. And Minnesota beat them.
The stripe out in the hockey is tough. So
yeah. And you know what? And we know great people from both those schools, so I thought it was good for them. And then there's another puck thing here. These are, let me see, the first 3 pucks hit me over the years. This is the first one to hit me back in 2005 against St. Cloud. That was before they had the nets up. I was behind a goal. Matt Kowalska shot, hits somebody, tips over, hit people right in front of me, just split right this, hits me right in the knee. And another reason I remember that, I was laid off from a job that same day.
Very memorable.
So, yeah. It's all fun. All fun and games. I see the Steves in the chat planning their trip in Vegas. Jeez, guys, come on.
We're just here to provide an opportunity for people to connect. So
yeah.
That's what we're here for. Glad you're going. Wish I could make it. Not in the budget this year.
No. Just watch on TV. Who knows? You got anything else?
I heard that there's a potential golf tournament coming up this summer that might be a fundraising opportunity. I think Golden Helmet Collective has maybe seen some opportunities to help support the new coach. As we heard the coach talk today about a director of player development and a goalie developer.
I noticed he said director of goalie.
Yeah, I think that's encouraging. They are going to have to fundraise, I think, for some of those salaries. I think that's part of the deal. So you'll be hearing people reach out about that, I'm sure, this summer. So
interesting.
Yeah. So I think that was news tonight, is that there will be a goalie development person on staff. So
yeah. All the rumors we've been hearing, it sounds like they've got their people.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like Leyland, Gordon, Martin, Potter, Cullen. I think those are your coaches that should be announced anytime soon.
Yes. I believe it's, Cullen would be taking Martin's old position, director, player development. Martin would be taking the defense. Where does Gordon or Leyland go?
Well, I think Gordon has got a good relationship with the forwards, and he's got a good relationship on the road with the current recruits that are committed.
Okay.
And I think it's really important for Minnesota to maintain those relationships. There's a lot of talent in the pipeline that Gordon's established a relationship with. So I think it's important to keep him and help that transition. And we'll see if there's a long-term fit there between Brett and Ben, but it's worth pursuing, I think, for everybody.
So then is Leyland in a similar position?
Yeah, I think Leyland's an experienced guy that has a good relationship with Brett, and that's a good thing to have on staff, and just someone else that he can rely on.
So right now, Pondersay is how you pronounce his name, is technically one of the
4 coaches.
So we're thinking either Leyland or Gordon would kind of go into that position, and Pondersay becomes one of those volunteer / part-time type of deal, correct?
Yep, and I think we'll see Leyland and Gordon on the road recruiting quite a bit.
Okay.
I think those are the guys who are going to be in a lot of buildings. One of the things Larson talks about is, it's not just about what you can do on the ice. It's how you react to mistakes. It's how you interact with your coaches. What's your body language like on the bench? And those are things that are hard to scout on video. And so I think he puts a premium on seeing players in person. And I think that will be one thing that'll change next year is you'll see a lot of Gopher coaches on the road.
Interesting. Very interesting. And it's almost like there's an extra guy there. It does seem that way.
I've talked to people who cover other teams that have basically like a recruiting coach.
Mm-hmm.
And, that was one of the things when you hired a fourth coach who could go on the road recruiting, the idea is that they would be on the road a little bit more than in the past. It's because you had that flexibility. And so I think that's what you'll see with a lot of staffs. You might not see a GM recruiter role per se with the Gophers, but I think you'll notice more coaches on the road next year.
Okay. That would be interesting. I see some comments. They need a top. What was that, Steve? My opinion, top level goalie is a priority. We're hearing rumors about that. I mean, this is probably an exact opportunity where they can use the portal to their advantage, right? Because for kind of somebody to replace Airy to give.
I am certain that they'll have another goalie coming in the portal, and we should find that out publicly very soon. Someone who's, not a freshman, not an 18-year-old, but someone who's going to be a sophomore next year and kind of bridge the gap. I think a lot of people understand that Casey probably needs another year of junior hockey before he'd be ready to come to Minnesota. And I think Luka proved himself as the number one goalie this year.
He was great.
And he'll get the majority of the starts. So I think it's important. You talk about top level goalies. Here's the thing. When you're a first round goalie, you are not in great control of your body at 18 and 19, and you are still developing quite a bit. I've talked to a lot of college hockey coaches about this. It's one of the reasons like high level goalies don't usually come to college hockey because the game is a little bit above where they're ready to play. And those goalies don't get really good until they're 23, 24. And typically those guys develop in the AHL and then come to the NHL at 25, 26. So it's just been a different path. And I think goalies really benefit from playing a lot of games. And that's what Major Junior does such a good job at. That's what European hockey does such a good job at. That's what USHL does a good job at. College hockey, there's less games. So it's harder to develop goalies in college. And maybe we'll start to see CHL goalies make a transition from CHL to college to HL pretty quickly. But it's just something that's been a challenge over the years. And that's why I think you see a lot of college goalies that are undersized be good, like Alex Tracy. I can't remember his name. The other Minnesota State goalie who was so good and everybody thought should win the Richter and the Hobie.
Oh, yeah. 20
And
seconds
he took
away. We'll see it in chat.
And he took some performance-enhancing drugs, maybe. Anyway, those goalies can do really well, I think, in college. But the bigger goalies who are going to be pros, it's a harder transition for them.
So on our production meeting here, should we do a show next Wednesday or maybe the following Wednesday? Maybe give that portal a little chance to breathe, or do you want to do it later in April when the portal's closed? What do you want to do here, Viggs? What do you think?
I think at least after a week of the portal.
Okay.
Is probably good for Dryden McKay. Yes, thank you.
We should have known that because they love to tell us who he was named after.
Right. So anyway, but I think we should give the portal at least a week before we get after it.
So about 2 weeks, then we'll have our next show. What do you think?
Yep, sounds good to me.
All right.
Should be exciting.
Do you got anything else?
That'll do her. Buckle up, everyone.
I think you're right on with that. So we'll see. Well, that's going to do it for this episode of the Gopher Puck Live Podcast. Of course, we thank Coach Brett Larson for being on with us. And like Vig said, we're going to wait a week, a little extra to close out the season, kind of see where the portal ends up. But that's about it for us. You guys have a great Frozen Four. I know it's teams you don't like. Just embrace it. Just have some fun. And it'll all be better. We're hoping Denver wins. Thanks for watching and listening, folks. you are watching on YouTube, hit that subscribe button and get notified each time we go live or post a video. If you listen on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please rate our show and leave a review. Wow. Where are we going to end up here, boys? It could be an interesting couple weeks, can't it? It's going to be
Look out for those defensemen.